Where cigarettes serve as currency, can vaping be better? Reducing harm for people in custody. People involved in the criminal justice system are also typically very involved with nicotine. Today, I'll orient you to their situation, the meaning and value of tobacco products to incarcerated people, and the reasons that they use tobacco at rates much higher than the overall population. Also, why harm reduction efforts that work at least somewhat on the outside world, such as smoke-free policies, don't work so well on the inside, in prison. And we'll look at another option, e-cigarettes. I'll share new data from some studies we've done in the United States, and you'll hear a bit about the experience of Scotland's prisons transitioning from smoking to vaping. I'll close by sharing how the example of vaping in prisons and jails can help reframe public perceptions of vaping and its harm reduction potential. Let's talk about vultures. Not the feathered scavengers like the one pictured here. There's another kind of vulture. It's a nickname in some prisons for a person who scavenges already chewed tobacco. And this slide quotes an article by a former prisoner. Interviews our team did with recently incarcerated people back this up. One person told us the cops would spit out regular chewing tobacco, and other prisoners, would turn that into cigarettes, which is really just nasty. I've seen guys pick it off the ground and re-chew it. That's how desperate some of these guys are. Tobacco in jail is basically air. Americans still smoking today are much more likely to be disadvantaged than in the past, often in multiple ways, and people in custody exemplify that. They smoke at several times the rate of the general population. The Bureau of Justice Statistics says that almost half would meet criteria for a substance use disorder prior to entering prison. They are less educated, poorer. Many have experienced trauma. As this WHO report states, tobacco use is completely entangled in prison life. It helps with boredom, stress, anxiety. It gives a little pleasure in a place with few joys. It's even used as currency. Another person recently out of jail told us, whether you smoke or you don't smoke, tobacco was. If you wanted to buy stuff off of somebody from the kitchen or gambling on a ticket, betting on sports events, tobacco was the currency. Studies find that the more disadvantages a person who smokes has, the less likely they are to quit smoking. And this study used U.S. National Health Interview Survey data and looked at data by insurance status from 1997 to 2013. Smokers who were on Medicaid had, quote, high and relatively unchanging smoking prevalence, as well as high rates of chronic illness and psychological distress. And this is similar to the incarcerated population, and this is why you have vultures recycling used chew. And this is presumably why well-intentioned smoke-free policies in prisons have led to massive contraband problems. This slide shows just a few examples. In 2021, the state of Mississippi gave up on its longtime smoke-free prisons policy. The Clarion Ledger newspaper reported that officials are hoping that lifting the ban on smoking inside prison will help curb the huge contraband trade that some inmates estimate may run in the millions of dollars. The urge to inhale is strong. Multiple studies report on results of providing nicotine patches to incarcerated people to replace cigarettes. In Australia, New Zealand, and Canada, people in custody turned nicotine patches and tea leaves into tobacco cigarettes. The researchers quoted there in the slide noted that the nicotine patch smoke not only smelled awful, but was likely more dangerous than secondhand cigarette smoke. That's why some jails and prisons had turned to e-cigarettes. Several companies had made vapes especially for inmates. No metal, so it can't be weaponized. Transparent to prevent smuggling, tamper-resistant, with tracking barcodes. A team that I led at McKinney Regulatory Science Advisors did studies of perceptions, behavior intentions, and the actual use of one such product. These studies were done for a U.S. Food and Drug Administration pre-market tobacco product application. There are ethical challenges to doing research with people in custody, so we focused on recently incarcerated people. And to better understand their experience, we started with structured phone interviews. We talked with 30 people who had had the opportunity to purchase legal vapes when in prison or jail, including the brand that we were studying, which is called e-cig for inmate. We learned a lot from those interviews, which led into the design of our online survey. For that, we recruited recently incarcerated adults nationwide using ads in Craigslist and Facebook. There were two groups, basically exposed and not exposed to prison vaping. The exposed sample must have had the opportunity to purchase e-cig for inmate devices during their recent incarceration. And some of them had been held in a jail or prison where it made the switch from legal cigarette sales to selling e-cigarettes. By contrast, the people in the non-exposed sample were in custody where no cigarettes or e-cigarettes were legally sold. After intensive fraud prevention and data cleaning efforts, we ended up with a total survey sample of 1,587 people. We have 578 adults who could have legally purchased vapes in a jail or prison commissary, and 1,009 adults who could not legally purchase vapes or cigarettes during their most recent incarceration. And as far as tobacco use, we made extensive efforts to recruit non-smokers and tobacco non-users, but we found, in line with other research on this population, that most subjects used multiple kinds of tobacco products, and most used at least 2 products daily. A third of the non-exposed folks that we surveyed had never vaped previously. One important factor was acceptability of the product to inmates, especially those who came in as smokers. We found that of those who could purchase an e-cig for inmate device, 95.1% of those who smoked before jail or prison tried it, and of those who tried it, 99% kept using it. We also found that 86% of non-smokers tried vaping, and all but 1 person kept on. Looking at intentions to try and use among those who could not purchase legal vapes or cigarettes during that recent incarceration, 2 of 3 daily smokers were very likely to or definitely would try vaping e-cig for inmate if reincarcerated, and just 1.5% of daily smokers said they were very unlikely to or definitely would not try vaping. 40% of our 85 current tobacco non-users also said they definitely would not try vaping if reincarcerated. The product came in 5 flavors, but most jails didn't sell all of them, so it was hard to assess the role of flavors in use and satisfaction. Smokers overall gave high satisfaction ratings to the product. Some were just glad to have any legal option. One said, that's the only choice. It's either going to be do that or do nothing forward. That's really the main thing, is you don't have a choice. Beggars can't be choosers. Another said it wasn't a matter of trying to deciding. It was a matter that I had to, no matter what they had, even if they had anything that's even remotely related to smoking or vaping or chewing tobacco or cigars. I wasn't being picky. Others talked about positive attributes or effects of e-cig for inmate. One said it's just like a little treat. While you're in jail, there's nothing good. The only things good are visitation and phone calls. Another said, I needed to relax because it helps me quiet down and calm down. And the ultimate test, one person who was in a state prison when the commissary switched from selling cigarettes to selling vapes told us that took probably about 6 months after tobacco was taken out that e-cigs became a currency. Did the experience of vaping while incarcerated make a difference after release? Note that this product, e-cig for inmate, is not available outside jails and prisons. But we did find that more of the people who vaped while incarcerated came out of prison as dual users. About half vaped before going in versus 3/4 after. Other studies suggest that this dual use, moving from smoking only to smoking and vaping, is a positive step toward reduced harm and often cessation. Also encouraging, 1 in 10 pre-incarceration daily smokers who used e-cig for inmate while in custody said they no longer smoke daily. Other research has found, by the way, that smoking bans have no impact on post-prison smoking. Of the dual users who had been e-cig for inmate vapors when in custody, more of them reported intentions to increase vaping or end up only vaping than intentions to increase smoking or end up only smoking. And further, about 15% said they intend to quit tobacco use. Our telephone interviews with formerly incarcerated people and the comments left in our survey supported what we had seen in published research, which is that contraband tobacco is easy to obtain. A typical comment is shown here. The black market's always going to be there. There's always going to be a guard willing to bring it in for the right price, always. So if they ban it completely, all that would do is drive the price up. For example, in the non-exposed sample that had no legal access in prison to vapes or cigarettes, half of the people who smoked daily before prison admitted to smoking at least one illegal cigarette in their officially smoke-free facility. Over half said that contraband cigarettes were available to buy or trade for in their jail or prison. Before I wrap up, I want to mention a useful international example. A few years ago, researchers from the University of Stirling, who are working with Scotland's prison system, researched the experiences of other nations that tried to address smoking in prisons, and Scotland decided on a planned transition from smoking to vaping. Across their series of publications, you can see that initial skepticism from prison staff gave way to support for vaping. This quote addresses the lack of a contraband tobacco problem in Scotland's prisons today. These findings may be explained by high levels of vaping among people in custody in Scotland as an alternative to tobacco, in contrast to other jurisdictions which have reported problems with illicit tobacco markets or NRT misuse. In short, from a public health perspective, the reality isn't that incarcerated people face a choice between vaping and not smoking. It's a choice between legal vaping and illicit tobacco. After doing this research and discussing it with my public health colleagues, I found that the plight of incarcerated people serves as a pure and clear illustration of the need for tobacco harm reduction. Even people who are initially negative about vaping, that addicts teens with flavors and causes popcorn lung, which is not true, they will change their views and say, okay, I can see a role for vaping with this population. And that recognition creates an opening for dialogue about harm reduction based on data. Most people who smoke today, including people in custody, don't have political power or visibility. Policymakers know teenagers, but they often don't know any smokers. As this recent opinion piece in the American Journal of Public Health points out, the singular focus of U.S. policies on decreasing youth vaping has been a distraction from the larger goal of tobacco control, namely reducing smoking and its harms. Further, overemphasis of the risks of vaping leads to cognitive bias that means we are inclined to reject the benefits. The example of people in custody can help rebalance the discussion of what's appropriate for the protection of public health. Youth are a vulnerable population, but they are not the only vulnerable population that merits our empathy and support. Thank you. If you'd like more information about this study or about behavior research on nicotine products for harm reduction, visit the website McKinney RSA.com.